When it became apparent that the inflow of modules was not slowing down, sometime around May of 2022, just after building prototype D, by the way, I realized that it was time to design yet another case, and the reason for that was mostly because prototype D was disintegrating before my eyes. You could probably see it best in this photo here. When look at the front lower edge there, the screws were literally being pulled out of the particle board. They weren't even holding the sides together anymore. What was keeping this case together was the rails. The modules were screwed to. That was holding the sides on. At this point, it didn't last very long, and I kind of knew that going into it because, again, particle board melamine is probably not the optimum material to use for something like this. And it likely fell apart pretty quickly because I was moving it around a lot. I was trying different areas to put this to try to find comfort in using it. I don't think that the angles were bad. I think the material was bad because I couldn't put my hands anywhere near this thing without getting shards of melamine shoved into my skin, and the rough edges of the particle board just didn't really feel good. And I could have sanded it all. I could have probably put some kind of hardwood trim on it to make it nicer. And in fact, I could have glued the sides on so that way it was not just screws holding it in place, but also wood glue. But all in all, this prototype D was, again, just a prototype. So I didn't really want to put a lot of work into it. I still like the golden ratio. I think my next custom build is going to end up being the golden ratio. So for now, we're just going to go with a nice and simple plain black rectangle. It's been a long road if you've been keeping track of what's been going on. I did start in July of 2021 in a cardboard box from Perfect Circuit. And then I built those little wooden cheeks that are still in use today in numerous different rail configurations. And after prototype B was made and used for a little while, I moved into the Behringer GO case for both modular journey videos, and finally Behringer GO is being used for the System 100 here. And then after that, I reused the wooden cheeks on my brand spanking new 168 HP rails times 4, so I wound up with 6U here, and that served me pretty good for a couple of months. But I had those 2 extra rails sitting around from Modular Synth Lab, and since they were just sitting there, I decided that's when I was going to design and build the golden ratio, which we started this with. And you see that it looked okay. The angles seemed fine. It was terrible material, so I scrapped it. But now it was time to get back out into the wood shop and come up with something that was my most complex design so far, a wooden rectangle. I actually remember coming up with this idea and thinking that I was the smartest man on earth. Why did I not think of doing this in the first place? Just a freaking rectangle that you could screw rails to and be done with it. I don't know why I tried all these fancy angles and fancy joints and all this fancy stuff, but here we are. We're simply going to make a box out of wood that is going to hold every one of my modules. So out to the wood shop I went, and I didn't have to make templates for this. I merely cut 4 pieces of 3/4 inch birch plywood into 6 inch wide slats and then made a box out of it. It was that simple. I didn't do any templates. I measured, of course, because they have to be as wide as the 168 HP rails, which is the only measurement I really took for the top and the bottom. The sides had to be 12U, but I did leave a little bit of space between each row because I did have to screw things in and be able to move the rails back and forth a little bit. But once the box was done, for the back I just found a piece of 3/4 inch plywood that I cut that would fit on the interior rim of the box and glued and screwed it in. I did learn my lesson this time. I didn't just screw things together. I actually used wood glue this time so things would stay together. So I glued all 4 joints together, and then I glued the back in and used brad nails, small tack nails to hold it all in place. And in a last minute thought, I did drill 6 2-inch wide holes in the top for ventilation, because heat will rise up and I needed a place for it to get out. So that's what those little holes are in the back of the case. Once the box was built, I did spray paint the interior of it black because I just wanted it to not reflect or have any lightness showing through when the modules were in there. So the whole inside got spray painted black, and then on the outside, I wrapped the whole thing in I guess they call it speaker carpet. I'm not sure if that's the proper term, but it's that fuzzy material you find on speakers most of the time. for the most part, it turned out okay, I guess. In order to adhere this to the wood, I used a spray-on adhesive, that kind that you spray on the wood, and then you spray it on the cloth, and then you lay the cloth in place, and then it's never coming off ever again. So I did do that, and as you can see here, I did a pretty shitty job. I got wrinkles and bubbles and weird stuff, but it's the back, so nobody cares. Again, when I do the real rack, I will probably do this differently. Like maybe I'll have an oversized piece of cloth, and I'll just drop it from outer space, and wherever it lands, and then trim everything around it. So speaking of trimming, I did take that cloth and I kind of wrapped it around on the long ways, but then on the top, in order for it to bend forward, I did try to cut it in a way that it could fold onto itself, but it was really shreddy material. I think it was a pretty crappy quality cloth that I bought, but you can see up at the top there, it's all frayed and whatever from my razor knife trying to cut through it, and then my ham hands trying to get it into place. So it doesn't look the greatest, but it's functional, and it's not meant to look beautiful, it's meant to work. After that was done, I did lay it down and start planning where the bus boards were going to go. The power supplies and bus boards, these were a little bit easier because I had a back on this, so I just screwed the power supplies to the back of the case, screwed all the bus boards into place using there's little spacers underneath it so the bus board's not touching the wood. All in all, I think this turned out really nice. As simple as it is one of my favorite cases now to date because it has everything in it. It has all 4 bus boards, it has both power supplies, so one power supply runs 2 bus boards. So like the left power supply runs the top 2, and the right power supply runs the bottom 2 buses, for instance. And then they all get fed off of the power connector. At this point, I decided to drag it into the house and set it up on the desk and see how it would fit, and it surprisingly fit pretty well in with the Kronos controller station that I had there, my speakers. I tried various angles to see if it was going to be what I liked, and honestly, this case turned out to be really cool in respect to the fact that it's almost like a 16:9 viewport, so I can aim a camera at it. So it fits really nice when you're trying to do films of just this one box here. However, I don't have just this one box here. I have the Behringer GO case that sometimes I throw stuff into, or the black rectangle and the sequencer rack using the old wood cheeks and the same 6U by 168 HP configuration for everything that's considered a sequencer type module. And now when you look at it this way, this doesn't fit any camera framing except to hold your phone like a Gen Z and go portrait mode, and then you can capture everything, and that's just silly. I kind of can't do this. So this is why you hear me whining about how things don't fit in the camera, and I have to use multiple cameras if I want to shoot stuff going on the sequencer rack, or stuff going on in the modular, or stuff going on in the System 100 in the Behringer case. It just winds up being a big pain in the ass. Once the new case was ready to go, I laid it on its back and started filling it with all of the modules I had at the time. And initially I did have all the System 100 modules in this case because I figured all the noisemakers would be in one place. I offloaded all the sequencers to the Behringer GO case for now, and that's how things ran for a little while. And then, just when I thought I was done with all of this, it occurred to me I needed to go one bigger, since now I had a plethora of sequencers.
A what? A plethora? Oh, yes. You have a plethora. What is a plethora? Why, guapo? I would not like to think that a person would tell someone he has a plethora and find out that that person has no idea what it means to have a plethora.
But now I had these 2 beautiful wooden cheeks that I've used all along just kind of sitting there doing nothing. So off to Modular Synth Lab I went to buy 2 more sets of 168 HP rails and the threaded strip insert, and of course another power kit. And the reason for this, the cheeks work so good as a design for Prototype C, I basically turned Prototype C into my sequencer rack. So it's kind of, I'm lumping it in here with the E, because that's when it all came to life, is probably within a month after building this case and working with it for a while. I offloaded again all of the sequencers because that pile kept growing as well. So I offloaded all of those into the 6U by 168 Prototype C case. And this is where we are today. As of April 29th, 2024, what you have today is the big black rectangle, the prototype C holding all my sequencers. We have the Behringer GO case holding all the System 100 modules specifically, and I'm using DarkTime as a sequencer with some of this stuff as well, although that was purchased for another project that's coming up pretty soon. I'm now going to go dust off those old Dope for DIY rails from day one, and I'm going to put them into another case specific for the mini-mod system that I purchased at the end of 2022 that I cannot believe I still haven't talked about over a year, but you'll see it showing up in videos here and there, Sonic Experiments once in a while, all the mini-mod modules I bought. The other advantage of these Dope for rails is that they have that distributed bus fanciness on there, which will work really well with the AJH Synth Minimod modules. So I can't wait to try that out. So that's going to be the next rack build that I have, is the AJH Synths Minimod system using the old Dope for DIY rails. Good God, man. But I'll end this on this particular note. I do not have and I really mean it when I say this, I do not see a need for any more cases or any more rails or any more racks, because the way things have been going, at least since January 1st of 2024, the way things are going is I am not allowing myself to buy a new module until I sell an old one of equal or greater value. So it's called net zero. That's what I'm trying to do, is I'm forbidding myself from expanding the modular collection anymore until I get rid of the ones that I don't use. I'm to the point right now where I don't think there's anything more that I want to get rid of. But we'll see. The year is young. So if you stayed with me through this entire case building journey, thank you very much for watching and sticking around. So this will not be the last video in this series, but it's the last video as of May of 2024. I have not built anything new since then. The next one is going to be that mini mod case. So stay tuned for that.